Good afternoon, everybody. Is there something, should I just kick it off, Aaron, or any of the housekeeping?
Yeah, why don't
You
you?
are the housekeeper today.
Housekeeping, okay. Uh, um, for Zoom, just make sure uh, that if you're muted if you're not talking. What else do we like to remind people about for Zoom?
um, just mostly, I encourage people to share their screens at the beginning because it's a little awkward if you try to do that. I mean, turn on their cameras. It's a little awkward if you try to do that halfway through, and a lot of people are not because then they feel kind of on the spot. So,
Okay.
turn on your cameras, please. Make sure remind people to be logged in. Sometimes I'll just do a quick demo about logging in, and then any other follow up from the previous lesson. And then in this case, just a reminder that we're going to go things kind of quickly and blah, blah, blah. So just, stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to try to go through this quickly and make sure that you can get access to the lesson 5B materials. And then we'll screen share those when we get to them. But this obviously is the lesson on writing SMART goals and objectives. And just to start out with, I want to ask everybody to describe in a single sentence something that you want to accomplish in general, personally or professionally. And do you think it's better to go around, or do you think drop it in the chat?
Usually I'll choose someone and then ask them to popcorn to the next person. So it's up to you how you want to do it.
Okay. Kim, can I call on you? And do you want me to reiterate the prompt?
Sure. Something I personally want to accomplish is making sure that I can have access to all the information at the right time when we're in these sessions. It's difficult trying to have two different devices. You're trying to coordinate everything. So it's a personal goal of mine, because typically I have staff members that do all this, is to make sure I can and be comfortable with it, because I'm struggling every time. Thank you.
All right. That was a good response. I'll just say, does anybody else want to do their version, a personal or professional goal? Because yeah, sure, go ahead.
That's great. I want to climb Mount Fuji before I'm 30.
Okay, wow. Okay, so these are both great examples, great responses, because basically we just asked you to say a goal, and actually, yeah, and some of them were very specific. Some of the two included details such as dates or time frames, and some were more aspirational than others, arguably. Okay, that worked out. This script worked out for that one, because I would say, yeah, response number two, maybe a little more aspirational, also included a time frame. And number one was just wanting to be able to actually access the materials. But they were both goals. And writing strong goals is the purpose of this session. And so here we go. I'm clicking on the second. There we go. Today's objectives. By the end of the session, you will understand the meaning of each element of SMART, be able to provide examples of each of the SMART elements, and then be able to write SMART goals and objectives. Okay. Today's agenda: group discussion, what is SMART, individual work, identifying SMART goals, and then finally group work. Let's get SMART. Okay, so what is SMART? Okay, so I think maybe we'll just go through these one by one. And S stands for specific. Do set real numbers. Don't say I want more visitors. Yeah, so any thoughts about specific? I don't know if I need to dwell on specific. Any questions about that? Measurable, make sure your goal is trackable. Don't hide behind buzzwords like brand or influence. Achievable, do work toward a goal that's a challenge but possible. Don't try to take over the world in one night. Realistic, do be honest about what your team is capable of. Don't forget any hurdles you may have to overcome. And then time bound, give yourself a deadline and don't keep pushing towards someday. So I think out of the two examples we had at the beginning, I think climb Mount Fuji before 30. Was that it? Or did I make up the mountain?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So I think that was it didn't have numbers in it other than the time bound. But I think it was measurable, achievable because it's something you can actually do in that time frame. Realistic, it's I think it's a mountain you can climb. I really don't know.
It's not too bad.
Yeah.
It's just the cost of getting there.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. That could have been our specific. Yeah, spend $12,000 to climb Mount Fuji by age 30, and then time bound. You want to do it by age 30. So that we already had a good example that covers most of those. I mean, obviously, in most of our work, we're trying to achieve some policy goal or outreach goal where we have a specific number in terms of people that we want to turn out or the number of events that we want to have. All right, so moving along, we have some examples that we want to measure SMART by. So where there are flaws in the SMART formula in some of these. So somebody want to take the first one and then read it and identify any flaws? Or what it's doing right and what it's doing wrong.
I'll read it.
Thanks, Aaron.
Okay. By the end of 2024, we will eliminate homelessness in America through our comprehensive 10-month career support program located in our centers in Los Angeles, Boston, Miami, and Chicago.
Okay, so is that one SMART in terms of specific?
Yes.
Oh yeah, actually, I agree. Yes.
And homelessness, I guess that's pretty specific.
Well, it's eliminate, yeah, so it's
Eliminate, yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Wildly specific.
So like 100% is the specificness. Is it measurable?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We will know that it's failed.
Is it A is achievable?
No.
Yeah. Okay. So then is it realistic or is it relevant? Is it relevant?
It's relevant, but not realistic.
Yeah. And then is it time bound?
Yes.
You have a time there, but
Okay. So it met most of the smart qualifications, except for a really important one in the fact that it's not actually achievable. So it would have to be adjusted then to be a goal that is achievable within the time frame that's being laid out. Okay. I guess a little more rapid fire here potentially. Does anybody see what doesn't work on this one? Specificity.
yeah, it says we don't know who.
Sure. Measurable.
Yes.
No, we will provide skill workshops. for
Financial
50
planning skill workshops.
Not measurable. It's not enough information.
Pretty general.
Okay, so could use more specificity on the skills and then achievable.
Yes.
Yeah, 50 youth. Yeah.
relevant.
It depends on how we define support themselves, if it's achievable.
Yeah, good point.
That's a good point.
Yeah, like how could you just teaching someone a few skills is going to make them able to support themselves? Well, I don't think if I taught my kids how to balance a checkbook, which I can't even do, they would be able to support themselves.
Yeah, it's like magically our debt has disappeared.
I think that's like a problem with a lot of these like workshopy type things that sound great on paper. Like it's also kind of egotistical. Like we're going to train these kids to do something, and all of a sudden magically they're going to be like self-sufficient, capable, educated people after our 3-week program, you know. So I look at these things kind of skeptically. I think it largely depends on the audience too, like who's reading it, like how experienced the reviewer is in the subject matter. Because some people may just look at this and be like, it looks good, sure, why not? When people who have worked with youth and understand the nuance of what it means to actually develop someone's whole person from social, emotional to competencies and financial stuff or education or math or whatever, there's a lot to it. So
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we've been in it too long, because when I read it, it's like too vague and not, it's like so that they are equipped with the skills to support themselves. What skills? Like, you know.
Yeah.
yeah, the more you dwell on it, the more issues you find with it, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good one though. It's workshoppable, I feel like it. At least. I mean, it just needs more specificity. And then we didn't get to it. Is this one time bound?
No,
Okay. Couple more examples.
Seemed like we went over these before. I've seen these.
Yeah, Kim, you've led this session before.
wait, we haven't seen this one, have we?
We did, some groups
Yeah.
opted to do SMART lesson in the conference.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because I'm sitting here like, what is going
Oh,
on
that's
here?
right. Morgan mentioned this. I think we talked
Yeah,
about this.
Kim's having a deja vu moment.
Well, this one looks like it has some issues. Like it's got time, it's got measurable, right? And then it looks like the issue was probably revolves around we'll no longer face any health challenges
hmm
in their lives.
in their
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah, believe it.
They could have simply just replaced that by reduce health challenges.
Yeah, that's an example of how ambiguity can work in your favor,
hmm
Mhm.
because you're just measuring some change. You don't really say how big or small it is, so it could be really easy to get there.
All right, then we have one more example. Okay. So this one is I feel like a similar problem, but specific.
I think it's specific. Because like I know what it is that they're trying to say, but
Yeah, but it's
Not really sure what the awareness campaign is, though.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
well, it's probably, I don't know. It's just hard to, I feel like, put all the information in one sentence. So I'm operating under the assumption they've explained it through elsewhere, but yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't know the project was solar panel until the last the last 2 words.
Mm-hmm.
definitely not
That's true.
measurable.
Well, I
Not
think you can measure that it's failed.
This is all of Southern California.
Yeah, 100% again.
I mean, technically it could be measurable, but how much would it cost to survey every single home?
Mhm.
It's
Of course you could do
unrealistic.
simple one. Realistic?
Unrealistic.
Unrealistic.
Unrealistic,
yeah.
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 Yeah, it feels like eliminate all homelessness by.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Southern
See. Okay, so we've covered those. I think since I sort of just launched into this, I think, probably should have started out at some point in there, hit on just the question of like, do you all have experience with SMART goals? So maybe raise your hand or something if you have, or your virtual hand. And then also, why are SMART goals important for the grant proposal writing that we plan to do?
Kind of keeps you on track to make sure that you've at least covered the important items in that initial sentence or two.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're also important because you want to make sure that the reviewer of the grant application understands, what it is that you're trying to achieve.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah,
Well-
it's just like both of you all said, like it's just a really clear sort of metric, or like a rubric that you can apply to your own writing to make sure that when the type of evaluation criteria that a reviewer is gonna apply to your application, that you've met all of the things that they're expecting to see.
It helps you to start writing that section on project plan and project activities and evaluation.
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, everything usually flows from your goals and your objectives. So if that is your starting point and you lay those out very clearly, it's going to be evident to the reviewer what you want to achieve. And the inverse is also true. If you start off with goals that don't make any sense because they're not realistic, it's not clear, it's impossible to achieve, then you're already kind of behind because the reviewer's starting to form an opinion about your worthiness, and he's going to start off really bad. So
I agree. Yeah. I'd say in my experience working with organizations, the organizations that tend to really have it together and can really speak with authority on the work that they do and have well-structured proposals. Before working on the proposals, what they have are really good objectives and a good budget. And I think those are like the two key starting bases for having strong proposals and strong materials to put forth to funders.
And then Aaron, normally in here, would you have covered kind of discussing a little bit about the use of goals and objectives? Because maybe should we do that maybe before we launch into the exercise?
Yeah, I think we have that scheduled at the start before we went into this. So, but if you find you like skipped over something, you can always circle back to it. Like now you're kind of realizing, oh, maybe we should provide a little context here. And sometimes it sinks in better if you do it after the exercise. So now could be a time where you kind of prompt us to be like, well, how how have you used goals and objectives in your proposals? We kind of already talked about what they are. So you can provide a little bit of that background or trying to get that out of us maybe at this point, if you want to do that, to tie everything together.
Yeah, I guess, how do you all sort of make use of the terms goals and objectives, since launching into those is going to be like, what's the difference between a goal and objective? Because it sounds very similar.
It's a great question.
So go ahead, Kim, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think, it's similar to inputs and outputs. Like, that's how I always think about, like, this is the goal. So we want to ensure that, residents in the South Ward, there's a reduction of like cumulative impacts of pollution is a goal. Then my objectives is, what are the things that I need to do to achieve that? So that's why it's just important anytime I use it as a training tool for all staff. Because if you can't understand a goal and see where you want to go and how you can get there, then we can't be successful.
I agree with you, Kim. For me, like the objectives are each piece by piece to the puzzle that is the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In most instances, you just have one goal, but you could have several objectives.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, because I think that some people mistakenly, well, not always mistakenly, but I think a trap people fall into sometimes is thinking, well, I'm going to have like 10 goals. And then they all seem watered down to whoever's reading it. And you're probably overcommitting and you're losing track. And therefore the reader is losing track of what the big picture is. So I think that's something to consider. I always think simplicity is better, less is more. If you can have a single goal as an umbrella that everything else, all the other work can fall under, I think that makes at least the presentation of your plan much more clear and easy to follow.
Yeah.
But what I noticed in it, and maybe just some clarification, because if we're writing certain grants and I have 3 different areas, I'll have a goal for my gala leadership. I'll have a goal for my water justice. I'll have a goal for my air pollution projects, and then I'll have my objectives. And sometimes when you're bringing in new staff or training up individuals how to write grants, that part is difficult because, you know, you got to kind of talk about all of those sections. But if your work, you know, encompasses those 3 things, you know, this is what you want to do. So I just find that challenging for someone like the newer staff.
Yeah, I think you laid it out perfectly, Kim. And that's a great way for people to grasp the concept too, is the goal is the endpoint and the objectives are the milestones. It's where you kind of, and you can use that in your evaluation too, to measure your progress towards your goal is the objectives. And you can kind of, so you can go backwards from your goal and kind of explain that to people in a very logical way that most will understand it. So I think that's a great way to present that.
Yeah, I do too. I'd also think, I mean, one thing that's possibly worth mentioning is that even conversations about grant projects, it could be useful to really focus them around the goals and objectives. Because I mean, I know sometimes you'll sit down to discuss a potential grant project, and the conversations can be really all over the place because the organization has a lot of things that you want to achieve. But then when you reset to really say, like, what's the goal here and what are the objectives that we're going to use to achieve it, it can be really helpful for focusing on how you're going to approach a grant proposal and just making your conversations about it more productive. That's just, and okay, so that takes us to this exercise. We're going to do the hypothetical exercise really quickly as a group here. Is the exercise still exercise 2, Aaron?
If you have your learning management system pulled up, because if you're on the page, I can share my screen if you want, if that's easier.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to switch over in a second. Yeah.
Let's see here. There it is. Okay. So this is in all of your learning management systems as well as your Google folders, but we're just sharing the screen because it's a good habit to get into, to share your screen when people have to read something, just in case someone can't get logged in or whatever. I don't know if that's big enough here, but let's see. Okay, so anyway, here it is. Morgan, you can just let me know what you want me to do, if anything. Actually, you know what? I'll open it up in the drive. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to open up bigger version of it. Just 1 second.
Lisa, I was just noticing that your cyber hand is still up. Did you have something you wanted to
no,
say?
I didn't.
Just a
No,
hand.
no. Let me take it off.
Oh, that's okay.
Looks terrible.
Oh.
For some reason, the handouts render oddly in Firefox, even though they turn out fine in Chrome.
I'm going to make note of that.
If you just make it, well, if people can see it on their own computer, they're fine. But then, maybe make it bigger.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. So essentially, this is the goal here is to take something that was some information that was written by an organization, take 2 to 3 minutes. Just read this as quickly, as much of this as you can as possible. And then we're just going to brainstorm some SMART goals for this hypothetical situation.
Oh my God, is this Dr. Bullet?
It looks like it.
It might be based on it, yeah. Probably. Or the other We Act. I think there's a We Act down there too. Similar name.
I would think it's Tejas.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
That just sounds like him with we stood up to some of the biggest petrochemical corporations.
Yeah, that's more like Tejas EJ Group. I don't know if Dr.
I
Book,
think so. It might be.
he comes and help out, but yeah.
You know, that was dumping in Dixie in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever wrote it, I particularly like the phrasing with an army of and arms full of data.
I think I wrote that.
Yeah. Nice job.
Like something new.
Okay, so they're applying for $100,000 EPA grant, and this is an air quality monitoring project. So does anybody have a sense of articulating like a SMART goal for this?
Well, they were pretty specific in that last sentence. Organization XYZ intends to start an air monitoring, quality monitoring program. So that's one thing. So they will have the data and knowledge they need. Well, they could have been more specific about what data and knowledge.
Would that be an objective though? Like is the final outcome or end that they're looking for to start an air quality program, or is it about the change, like policy change or health change or?
Let me think. Let me read.
Yeah, they want to have policies to help change and reduce the pollution, that's in their community. So
I haven't run
They
a
have-
project like this myself to know the specifics, but is 100K enough for something of this magnitude?
Well, we have an air monitoring project with 10 purple air monitors, and it's way more than 100,000.
Yeah, like I'd be looking at this and be like, this must be like a $5 million project or something.
Well, it won't be
thinking of the
5 million.
personnel.
But it's depending if they, and that's the thing about the goal. If it's not for staffing, if it's for the purchase of equipment and engagement of residents. That's why I was trying to, those last 2 points down the bottom.
Yeah.
So company X, Y, and Z is seeking $100,000 to support our hyperlocal community monitoring with 5 community-based groups for air quality monitoring for 6 months or something. I mean, something
That was pretty good off the cuff.
Yeah, that's good. This kind of brings up an interesting kind of paradox in that you can have like a goal within an objective or something. Like there's like maybe the goal that these people want is improved air quality and hold the polluters accountable, but their goal for the purpose of applying for this grant is to start an air quality monitoring program. So the goal for the project might be just that, because that's what they can achieve with $100,000. And that in and of itself is sort of an objective towards the endpoint. But for their little microcosm, the goal is to start a air quality monitoring program so they have data. Getting that data is part of the process to influencing public policy or something like that. So it can get kind of complicated, but I think that's why you know, if you have just one writer, and when you're training people, this is something to bring up too about the process, is you can't really sit down and do this all by yourself, because you're not going to think about this stuff. As we bounce ideas off each other, we're thinking about how layered it all is and how complex it is, and we have to think about how to make it simpler, because it may be complex, but the readers don't want to spend all day getting in your head. They want to give them a simple solution, and that's
That
what
is
makes
such-
it challenging.
Yeah, that was such an important point you just brought up about the goal being, is it the goal for this funding that you're requesting, or is it the goal of what you're working towards, which can be very different things.
Yeah.
And this is where you can build that context in too. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think
So-
one of the other keywords is to start an air
Exactly.
quality monitoring program. So this can be a grant, you know, for the involvement of a air quality community-based team, you know, where you
Yeah.
talk
Mhm.
about what it is, and then just the purchase of the equipment. You know, it's so, I mean, as I keep rereading it, it's
Yes.
just so much more that's now popping.
Mhm.
And because I you know, I work on a lot of air quality monitoring projects, but
Yeah.
So that whole sentence seems to be their goal, so you would think that the 1 and 2 might be an objective, but it's not. It's part of their goal.
yeah,
Fair.
yeah.
Well, and government grants and some philanthropic grants obviously don't support advocacy. So your goal maybe have to be what your objective maybe kind of becomes a goal for that reason. Because if the objective is to do a precursor study, then that objective becomes the goal kind of for the purpose of the grant, and then you know what you're gonna use it for.
Mhm.
Mm,
And I
yeah,
think
you have
that's
to,
where groups get stuck too, right at that point, Morgan.
well, it's because you have to match up
Yeah,
what
true.
they want to hear with what you know is going to happen. So you know that they don't share the same goal as you. Their goal is just to give the right person the right equipment and to check off the box and say they use the money appropriately. Your goal is to improve the community, but you have to tell them your goal is to put up these air monitors, and that's kind of, you know, you have to make your staff see that there's often a disconnect in what everyone's interests are. So you kind of have to plug that square peg into the round hole and just make it work sometimes. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be transparent and kind of present the big picture, but
Mhm.
you know, when the rubber meets the road, your goal has to be about what they want it to be about to get the
Mhm.
money.
Yeah, this might be one of those examples where 1 and 2 might be a bit too much information for the purpose of this project, which is to start an air monitoring, quality monitoring program.
Wow, we talked about a lot of things. I don't know if we answered your question, Morgan. If we wrote it out in a
I think we got the goal out there. That seems to be covered.
You know, and the purpose of this segment of the lesson plan is to prime the participants for what comes next. This is kind of to demonstrate, this is because you're going to throw them, Morgan's going to throw you into a small group exercise next, where you're going to have to dive in and do something like this. And now he's given you a demo that you've all kind of worked through together. So it's not a mystery. So the answer doesn't really matter. Morgan is just doing a demo of the process and helping you think critically about it, asking you pointed questions and prompts to get you to consider different perspectives and helping us see the complexity so we can build that into our analysis when we get to that point.
Yeah, because I guess you don't need to double down and insist on getting a goal out of this, because you're going the next activity we're doing is on case studies that I think are a little simpler than this, right?
Yeah, and also remember that at this point you may have 10 people in the group, and you probably have 2 or 3 people who are really participating a lot, and 6 or 7 who are just kind of idling, maybe listening, maybe spacing out. So you don't want to spend too much time on this. You want to use this as a way to get them familiar with what's going to happen next, and then get them in those small groups as quick as possible. As one thing Morgan and I talked about this morning is that from our feedback, we know that the aspect of the training that our participants value the most is when they're working in pairs or small groups or even doing stuff alone and then getting feedback on it. So the hands-on part is really what's the most valuable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to stop sharing now. Sorry.
Yeah. So it looks like we have about enough folks for two groups. And then Aaron, I mean, if we're going into breakout groups, how should we share the
So one person in each group should have the LMS pulled up. I'll put the link to the lesson in here just in case people don't have it handy. Now, if you're already logged in to Writing for Green, this link will take you directly to, I'm just looking for the chat. It'll take you directly to the lesson. So you can bookmark this also, so you don't have to constantly try to navigate all the way through all the different steps. But so just make sure, Morgan will probably check in with each group to make sure you guys have this pulled up. Hold on a second, I'm getting it. Okay. Okay, I pasted the correct link in there. You'll see that, and then you scroll down, you'll see these handouts. It's actually the third handout, so that's the second handout. And then you'll see this handout here. You guys see that? Those are the 3 case studies that Morgan is going to be assigning you.
I also have it in I mean, I guess you're just trying to make sure people that we can all navigate the LMS, right?
Yeah, you know what?
Yeah, but that's the problem when you show the Zoom and we're on a computer and we switch over to go to
Right.
where he is, we can't see you navigating which one. So like I'm on the lesson details and materials, right? I'm and it's grant writing training course live, but I don't see the handout. So when I go switch back to see what he was just scrolling down, then you know, because it's not like I was trying to have my phone open and this, but
It's
that's what I'm saying. This is part of the problem for me. I don't know if everybody else had, but that's the problem with me because you're trying to watch, but then you click it, and so the screen doesn't show.
Yeah, you have to definitely take some, as a facilitator, there's a certain way that I like to have my screen set up. I have 2 screens. So I have the lesson plan on the left and everything I'm sharing on the right. And then for the students, that's when you'll have to help them get oriented on the first couple sessions.
That's why I wanted the later, like if there was later training when I can have a staff member present. My staff can't participate after 4 o'clock for stuff like this. So it's, you know, this is problematic for me, but.
One thing we're doing is we have office hours once a week, which you can sign up for on our website. I'll share the link later. And we're also going to match all the Tic Tacs up with either me, Catherine, or Sol to be kind of your personal mentor or guide as you think through implementation and just get you up to speed with the tech support too. So, because we don't have time to do all that one-on-one, but Catherine can meet with you tomorrow or whenever, Kim, and your staff, and take the time and walk you through all this stuff and think through how to set up the screens and how to do the sharing efficiently and all that stuff. Because you're right, it's very frustrating if you don't have that optimized, and you really do need to optimize it when you're facilitating, and you need to know how to explain it to the students because they'll get frustrated if they can't figure it out too. There's a lot that can go wrong.
Right, because it's what I'm saying. This is like my second time, and every time, and I know it's been some, you know, I'll deal with that offline, but because I don't want to hold everybody else up. But I mean, it's a problem because even as, like I said, I'm live and I still don't see what you're saying. So
I feel I found personally doing these sessions, like what Aaron's done most of the time with the 2-person facilitator, to me is so nice to have someone who's like just focusing on tech links and sharing the screen, and the other person focusing on delving into the content, helping lead discussions. Because for me personally, if I have to be responsible for typing as well as trying to engage sessions. I really can't do both. So I'll just be like, wait. So having two people on hand is invaluable to me in terms of the flow for these sessions.
Catherine, can you connect with Kim after and set up a time to meet with her and or her team to go over whatever she needs help with?
Sure.
Thanks.
But yeah, and I agree. Like, I have two screens, but I don't normally use them. But I feel like for this, it's like, I don't know how I would do it without the two screens.
Yeah.
I'm not using two screens right now, but I'm using one screen, but I guess two different drives maybe.
Two different
Because
windows.
I have two different windows because I have your presentation on one window, and then I have another window where I have my lesson plan on. So
Mhm.
I'm able to see the 3 case studies and follow it and just kind of toggle between the two.
You might find when you're facilitating, like I really need two whole screens because when I'm facilitating, I need one screen for the lesson plan. I have half the screen with the lesson plan, half the screen with Zoom, and then I have a whole other separate screen with the things that I'm sharing. Because as a facilitator, you need actually
Right.
3 windows open. So yeah, there is a solution. So that's one of the things that our tech support, Catherine, will help you figure out. Like, in a half hour, we can kind of sit down and walk through the stuff. Anyway, let's get back to Morgan because he's got to wrap everything up in 15 minutes. So
Okay,
I think
gotta wrap it up here. Okay, so and the one thing I don't know in this Zoom, am I able to do the breakout?
no, I have to do it because I'm the host. So you want me to make 3? How many breakout rooms do you want?
It's almost like 2, and then maybe, let's see, what do you think if,
I would do 2. I think 2 because usually 3 people in a group is good.
so yeah, we're pretty close to that.
We need to assign which case study each group is going to have, because I see 3 case studies.
Point. Okay, so let's see who makes what makes sense as the groups. I can number people off. And leave my
Number 1, we've already talked about. That's the air monitoring one.
Actually,
It would be faster if you just said maybe like if you split Erin in one group, myself in another group, and then Erin would be representative of a case study and I could be representative of another case study.
If the rooms are numbered 1 and 2, can't the case studies be numbered 1 and 2? So
Here we go.
So I've got 2 groups right now that just set up automatically. Morgan, Paige, and Yvonne in one, and Kim, Lisa, and Catherine in another one. So how about Morgan's group do 1 and the other group do 2?
Right.
Sure.
And so Morgan, before we split up in a group, I find I get to repeat the instructions like 5 times because people, kind of space out. So let us know again what we're doing and how long we have.
Okay, so everyone is going to have one. Everybody knows we've got 1 case study per group, 1 and 2, and then for each one as a group, you're going to write 1 goal, and then 3 to 5 objectives that support that goal. So going to do that, say like 7 minutes or so, and then come back into the big group and then report out. So did I miss anything there? Or are we good to go?
Yeah, that's good. Sometimes sometimes it helps to assign someone in your group to take notes just to make sure it's happening. But you can be as specific as you want, but the less you leave to chance, the more smoothly it'll go. So
okay. So assign a person to be the note taker, please.
And okay, so I'm going to open the rooms, and then I'll close them in 7 minutes. So 3:25, 3:24.
Baby, we were screwed on this one. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a game against the clock.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's a tight timeline.
I was taking notes. Lisa, you was taking notes. I don't know who else, but baby, we didn't complete it.
All right. Well, in that spirit, we can start with you all, or we can start with the other group.
We can read our half sentence.
Such an evil laugh.
Yes.
Well, we do have the goal.
All right.
I mean, we do have one objective. We started from objective and was going to go back to the goal. And so I'll read it and you guys chime in. Our objective is to identify and recruit 50 youth from San Antonio, Texas, to participate and complete a 6-month leadership program. I miss anything, team 2?
By 2025,
Oh, nice.
the deadline, timeline.
By 2025.
Yeah.
It was a lot in that paragraph that they wanted to do, and trying to like decipher, and we got lost in that translation. Lisa, y'all want to chime in?
No, I think you did great. We have one objective. We never developed a goal, but we have an objective.
Sorry.
I think the goal becomes to prepare youth, to prepare leaders of tomorrow for the San Antonio Citizens for Change organization. I think that becomes if I had to throw out a goal.
When you're doing this for real, there's the small groups have 25 minutes, so there's much more time to work through that stuff.
Glad to hear.
So our goal may have been something like to develop a youth leadership program for residents of San Antonio between the age of 18 to 25, and start like that. A simple one, and then we can go with the objectives. So yeah, our goal would be to target 18 to 25, meaning the age, to participate in the youth leadership program. Is that specific enough?
For San Antonio, we got to make sure we put San Antonio Citizens for Change.
Mm-hmm.
I-
But it wouldn't be to develop, it would be to train. So because developing will be part of our objectives to develop that program, right? Our goal would be to train them, right? To provide the training for the 25 youth, right?
Well, I feel like that could be even narrowed down to an activity or an objective, like the training itself. I think the goal is like more,
Okay.
to me, like the behavior change, or where do you want them to end up?
Sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's what I said.
Okay.
Prepare them to be leaders for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
Preparing, youth between the age of 18 and 25 to be leaders of tomorrow for the San Antonio Citizens for Change organization.
Right.
Yeah, because that sounds like a goal, more like a goal. I feel like the goal can take a lot more wordsmithing than the objectives. I don't know about other people.
Well, the objective should be more specific than the goal. The goal, I guess, can be more general.
I mean, it's easier, I think, to map out, to reverse engineer the objectives if you already know what the goal is. So that in itself just infers that the goal should take much more time and effort, and probably 20 minutes is not enough time to come up with one. So, that's something just to reinforce with people. It may take several iterations to come up with a good goal that meets all the criteria we talked about, that's specific and measurable and stuff. And then once you have all those attributes to your goal, then it's much easier to work backwards and figure out the steps you need or the objectives to get there.
So you're right, Aaron. The goal should actually include some of the specifics, such as how many, the target population and all of that. We don't have to save that to the objectives.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying there should be some specificity in the goal, but my point is that the goal is the big picture. Everything's got to flow from the goal. So if you don't get the goal right, then none of your objectives are going to be right. So just to underscore, when you're teaching this subject matter to your students, that spend the time you need to get the goal dialed in. So it really reflects what you want to accomplish and the impact you want to have. And then figure out how many people you have to train to get there, how many meetings you got to have, how many signatures you got to get, how many air quality monitoring stations you got to set up. That stuff will flow relatively easily once you have the goal. But if you have the wrong goal, then all your objectives are going to be wrong too. So kind of shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah. Well, your goal could start out as something like eliminate homelessness, but then by the time you're done with the objectives, I imagine it would wind up being more specific than that, because you would realize it's not achievable
Mhm.
with
So-
like $100,000 or
Right. That's what I was going to say. The goal to me is a little more broader. The objectives become the specific kind of things of what you're going to do. So you kind of say, you start off, our goal is to train, youth to be leaders of tomorrow for X, this company, X, Y, and Z. And then you kind of come up with what those objectives are. And then sometimes you do tweak the goal.
Mhm.
So when you're doing your trainings, you're going to have probably a mix of people in your group, mix of experience levels. Some people will be at Kim's level, have a ton of experience, and will be offering that experience, and you want to draw upon that. And other people will just be completely lost. And you can leverage someone like Kim to have her share her expertise and use her examples as kind of the benchmark, as a teaching tool. And that way, it also takes some of the burden off you as a facilitator, so you're not feeling like you have to come up with all the answers. And you're also kind of demonstrating, how showing that other people can do this successfully. Picking out someone from the group to do it. So just something to keep in mind. Just leverage the resources that you have in that group. Morgan, do you want to just kind of close things up? Because I know there's more to do and it's going well, but we want to move on to the next thing, because this is obviously we're under a time constraint to get both of these lessons in. So you wrap up and then we'll do a quick debrief and give Morgan some feedback.
Yeah. I think, the wrap up, I think it's just worthy. This is a really great lesson. Honestly, I think it's a core lesson, because if you can articulate your goal, and you can demonstrate the objectives that support it, I think you really have the core of a proposal. I know when I work with our project teams, a lot of the time I'll focus on our meetings, just making sure to get the goal and objectives and activities that support them right. And then I can pretty much go and do the rest of the grant for the most part. So what we did really here is the kernel of, almost any grant that you would write. So I think this is like a really sort of milestone lesson. I don't know if other people have any reflections on it. Otherwise, I think, this is I like this one because it's a really critical component.
Well, folks, let's share some feedback from Morgan about how he did with his facilitation. So just jump in whenever you want.
Excellent. I think you did a great job with facilitating and following the lesson plan.
What specifically do you think you did well?
The way he kept the audience engaged.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Others? Paige.
Be critical too.
Yeah, no, I think I think you did a good job kind of walking us through the material and also giving us time to digest it a little bit and read through and kind of come up with, like, when we were going through the different case studies and examples, I think it was helpful to have some time and speak through it together. So I think you did a really good job at kind of facilitating that discussion.
Thanks.
I think it also helps us to see how important it is for us to give participants enough time to really work through these exercises, because if you don't, if you don't have enough time to actually work through it, then you don't really get to learn that particular skill. So I think having the time to do the exercises correctly would be the best learning experience.
Yeah, we cut off like the best part of the lesson, which is the doing the small group work, but we knew that was going to happen. Catherine?
Me? Yeah, I think it was good that particularly really core component of the lesson is really getting an understanding of the goals and objectives and how they differ before going into the groups. And I like that although you recognize that like, oops, I might have skipped over an important component, that you took a moment to reflect on that and go back to that. Because I find when I'm facilitating, if I'm a bit nervous and I think, oh, I missed something, like maybe I would feel almost not brave enough to go back or remember to acknowledge my mistakes. And I think that's very important as facilitators, is like, take a moment, take a breath and be like, you know what, can we take a pause for a moment and reflect on this? Because this matters. This is some content I want you to walk away with today. So I think it was good that you did that. One thing in reflection, and I recognize that we are constricted for time, but just early on in the beginning, to just gauge people's understanding of the lesson and topic is to just be mindful of that we're not feeding too many answers to participants and trying to see where they're at before really getting into some of the discussions or the reveal, I should say, for some components.
Now, I went back to the lesson plan. Is there anyone where in there that gives us a good example of what this should look like?
I mean, the lesson plan has detailed notes for you as a facilitator. So a lot of stuff is in there. So you want to look that over the day in advance of delivering the lesson. So you can make additional notes to yourself if you want to make other points. To Catherine's point about acknowledging if you made a mistake, if you missed something, well, you know what? No one knows that you made a mistake. You made one, they don't know something is out of order. You're the only one with a lesson plan. So you can always adjust things on the fly as you did. I thought your presentation got much smoother as you progressed through it. In doing this for the first time, it's hard. Like I had a real hard time doing these for the first time. And I thought the where you facilitated the discussion around, what is a goal and objective, and discussing letting the groups present and kind of letting the discussion flow. I think that was good. You didn't try to inject yourself too much. And I do agree with Catherine that I think that having more engagement, like at the front end, would get people involved more right away. Like instead of presenting them with the answers, ask them some prompts, get them to think about it, and then fill in the blanks. So get them to contribute as much of the information, because they'll give you most of the answers, and then you can kind of pretend that they came up with it. Well, they did, but even if those are the points you're going to cover, you could probably tease it out of them. So it seems like they've kind of come up with ideas themselves. So those are just little things. And a small thing, but useful, is that if you position your camera like in front of your lesson plan, that way when you're looking at your lesson plan, you're also looking at the camera. People don't see your eyes.
That's a good point.
So we think you're making eye contact and everything is kind of off the cuff. You could be reading from a script that I would never know. So overall, I thought that was good. I thought you did a good job.
And I was stepping back for a minute, but I just wanted to say too, like at the beginning, you also made people feel good, even though when we answered it not the way we should have. Your first question, it was like there really isn't a wrong answer, even though you kind of.
There's always a wrong answer.
Like I did not answer what Morgan wanted me to ask, but I went to my own diatribe, but that was very soothing, and I think that's helpful, because people come into the space and their head is they all trying to get stuff together, and so they're not actually present. And by him just doing that, it made me, oh my God, reset, Kim, you're all over the place. It really got me to get under control. So I appreciate that, and how he kind of transitioned, from the beginning. That was helpful for me, so I could kind of get back to what I was here for. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
helping people get in the right headspace is important. Like try to form like a little rapport, like do some small talk at the beginning. I don't know if you did this on purpose, but it is important to let everyone answer the question. You might have just been doing that to get through it quicker, but so the question could be light, could be relevant to the topic. It might just be something weird thing. But give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. And if there's new people in the group, have everyone say their name in addition to the question. So it's hard to establish like a sense of community in this virtual stuff. So you really have to, it takes a lot of effort to get there, and it is definitely challenging. So just be attentive to that as you're planning out your sessions.
Mhm.
So with that, let's move. Why don't we take like a 4-minute break? So Catherine has a even 45 minutes. And
Okay.
again, we're doing all these lessons are at an accelerated pace per the request of everybody. And to respect everyone's time, we're gonna end on time. So Catherine will make adjustments accordingly, because again,
Yep.
we're focusing on kind of the delivery and the process of facilitating and so forth, more than the actual subject matter. So that's why we're kind of rushing through some things. We just want to make sure that we cover all the segments and at least kind of explain the principles behind how the lesson plans are structured. That's kind of the main point. So, right, get going.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. I think
Hi,
we're gonna.
everyone.
What?
Oh, I just said hi, everyone. Sorry. All right.
Hey, everyone. I'm gonna jump right into the session in the interest of time. So I'm hoping everyone. It looks like everybody's here, so that's good. Good start. So if you all are signed into the LMS, we should be on lesson 5C, writing with authority. So typically, to open up this lesson, we would begin by introducing everyone and having everyone name a person that they trust and provide a reason why they trust that person. So for the interest of time, we are going to hold on mentally to that person that we trust and jump on this Jamboard that I have just copy pasted into this chat. And is everyone familiar with Jamboard and know how to write post-it notes on it? Have we gone over that before, Aaron?
I don't know.
May I
Okay.
ask you, when you had mentioned Jamboard is going away, do you know yet what will be used in instead?
Yeah, Google will be importing 2 very similar platforms to phase in and out. The functionality is very much the same. Just different name, different brand. So if you, I'm sharing my screen. Can everyone see it? Okay. Okay, so someone's already. So I'm hovering with my mouse over
Yeah,
sticky
person.
notepad. All you have to do is click the sticky notes and type in information, then click save, and it'll pop up on the Jamboard. Today's Jamboard, while you're thinking about the person that you trust, whether this is someone you know personally or it's someone of celebrity status, think about what is the reason that you trust them. What are the characteristics that they have that make them trustworthy? And if you can fill in 2 sticky notes each, providing a reason why you trust them or what characteristic makes them a trustworthy person, that would be much appreciated.
Oh, so we're not typing the person we trust, just the characteristics, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But my dog can just stay for posterity's sake. Is anyone having trouble accessing the Jamboard and clicking on the sticky notes? Okay, I'll take that as a no.
Well, I'm clicking, but it's not allowing me to actually.
Okay, so when you click the sticky note, is this cursor not showing up and it's not enabling you to type, or?
Yes, it's when I click the sticky note, and it could be that.
Well, Lisa, do you want to just vocalize to me what you were going to write and I can write it in for you?
Okay, it's let me do it now.
Okay. Oh, this one's very sweet. She loves me unconditionally. Oh. Okay, so I'm
But
seeing,
only two, right?
yes, please. Just in the interest of time, sorry. Okay, yeah, that one kind of has some overlaps there. Okay, so just to keep it moving, I'm going to talk about some of these cards, and from the looks of it, we can see that there's some trends that are emerging in one that someone who is honest and authentic gives us the impression that they're trustworthy. And then another category of dependable, where time and time again, if they're coming through, that indicates trustworthiness. And then having knowledge on a topic or the ability to appear knowledgeable on a topic makes them trustworthy. But I think this category was interesting, easy to work with, doesn't make unreasonable promises or commitments. So someone that puts you at ease then creates a sense of trustworthiness as well too. Did anyone want to share about for who put she loves me unconditionally, about how that translates to trust for them? I was just curious if anyone who wrote it feels comfortable to share.
That was me. That was about my dog, who was, I guess, technically not a person. Okay, so how does it because I know that she'll never, I know that I know I can trust her because she would never do anything to hurt me. She would never, so.
So I can nest that under dependable, like through the love they can stir you wrong. That's very sweet.
Dumb to be manipulative, so.
Yeah. So looking at the what a thing to say. So looking at these and filling in some of these responses, you might be thinking, okay, why are we thinking about trust and how does that apply to grant writing? And so the purpose behind this exercise is linking the similar qualities and characteristics that we find in people that we trust. Can be relatively similar and seen across the board. And actually, when that comes to writing and writing with authority, there are also similar characteristics and things we expect to see that establish whether a piece of writing is credible, whether it's authentic, whether it's something that we can trust. So with that in mind, we are going to spend today's session learning about what builds trust in writing and what writing with authority means. And can everyone see the screen I flipped to? I'm moving over to the slide deck. I just want to make sure it worked. Okay.
Yeah, see it.
Okay, great. So before diving into the session, just a quick overview, today's objectives are that by the end of the session, you will be able to understand types of evidence and when it's appropriate to use them, incorporate several types of evidence into a proposal, know how to properly cite a source, and know where generally we should be looking for reputable sources. The agenda is going to be beginning with a group discussion and an overview of types of evidence and citations. Then, if there's time, we'll see an individual exercise of incorporating evidence into writing, and then a group discussion that will allow us to peer review the written pieces we've worked on. So I'll try to be my own typist. I'll do my best. But for this first question, in all of your experiences, if we can get 2 or 3 responses here, what does it mean to you to write with authority?
Understanding the content.
A voice that's active and direct.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess communicating the message clearly and effectively.
Awesome. And bearing that in mind, when you're thinking about actual written evidence, can any of you name what you think an example of evidence would look like?
Statistic.
Yeah.
Nice.
Along those lines, academic research.
Research. And I think, Paige, you're about to say something?
Yeah, maybe like personal accounts, depending on what you're writing about.
Okay, great. Okay, great. These are all good broad examples of what writing with authority could look like when incorporating sources. I'm trying to think about for time what I should skip over. So 1 second. So I will just briefly then show our handout that we have on the lesson, where we have types of evidence and hierarchy of evidence. And so this is actually a really comprehensive resource that Writing for Green has developed that I have used often. That when you're thinking about the types of evidence you want to incorporate into writing, when you're doing professional writing or proposal writing, there's actually resources that are of lower quality or have less authority, and then those that have higher quality or have the most authority. And there's this great chart in this handout that goes from what we would consider the lowest type of evidence, which would be anecdotal. So that's the least trustworthy resource in a description. And then the highest quality, which goes all the way up to what we call meta-analysis, which was new for me. I did not know what that was before on this course. So in case anyone else is curious, it's a systematic review that takes into account multiple evaluation and research studies in summation. But looking at these, do any of you have any thoughts on why we would consider anecdotal the lowest form of evidence in terms of it being authoritative and accurate?
Well, it may not be based in fact. Someone's opinion, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but it doesn't necessarily make it accurate. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, initially I was like, oh, but if a person is there on the ground, they can probably speak to it well, speak to an issue well. But then I had to think about, oh, it's kind of like a witness in a court case where they can only see it through one lens or their specific mindset of how this issue came about or what is the issue, and they only know from their frame of mind. So it made sense to me thinking of it that way, where I was initially thinking if someone's on the ground looking at an issue, they know what's up, but they don't necessarily know the whole story.
Catherine,
Yes.
I think there's a caveat though, especially if you're writing with communities that are used to having their lived experience dismissed, that's
Yes.
anecdotal. That there is a sum of wisdom and fact within that lived environment and community. And so it's appropriate in some instances to include that and give it its
Absolutely.
own, as opposed to dismissing it or discounting it as something that's hearsay.
Exactly. And for myself as a grant writer, I very much value anecdotal evidence to speak to the feeling, the impact of an issue. But I think it's in this particular mindset of thinking of making something authoritative or backing things up with evidence. What the main message here is that you can't rely entirely on anecdotal evidence alone to prove your case. You need it backed up by strong sources that help bring credibility and lend credibility to the anecdotal evidence that you're bringing to the stage as well, if that makes sense. So then here we have a one-sheet overview from highest quality to what we would consider lowest quality in terms of authoritative writing. And then beyond that, now, oh, sorry. Did you
I was
want to
gonna
say
say, I think that, I mean, Yvonne brings up a good point, and this is something to underscore when you're teaching this as well, is that this is not like a Bible, like you have to look for meta-analysis and randomized controlled trials, because a lot of these things are not really appropriate for certain types of grants. So it's often good to have a mix of different types of evidence, like Catherine was pointing out, have a story, you know, and back that story up with statistics, or provide the statistics and then help illustrate that with a firsthand account from the ground. So I think Catherine's point is just, or what I took from it anyways, don't rely just on anecdotes, especially, you know, and of course it depends on the funder too. Maybe the funder is like a really grassrootsy organization. They don't care about research. They just want to hear, you know, from people from the community. So it's all contextual.
Thank you. Yes, appreciate that. And so with that in mind, all these different types of evidence are out there. But for some of the groups or individuals that you'll be working with, they might not be familiar with how to incorporate these types of evidence into their written work. So we have two main categories of how to cite these pieces of evidence or sources. One is called superscript, and then there's two forms of inline citation. And so we have some visual examples here. So this is the first one. Here we go. With inline citation, where we see in 2020, the median family income in Barton County, Missouri was $34,422, which is 22% less than the state of, that's Missouri, right? I'm sure myself.
He doesn't get out of Rhode Island much.
Yeah. And so you can see there's no quotations here, but the source is cited at the end in parentheses. Whereas in superscript, it's within the writing itself, where you're saying in 2021, Barrett et al. So in this particular piece of evidence, reported, et cetera, et cetera. Then
I just realized there was an error in that last slide, because there's not a superscript. It's just the number one. It should be a see at the end. That one should be. I think the designer didn't know how to do that probably, so we missed that.
Okay, we'll go back and fix that. And then lastly, another form of inline, where again, it's actually with quotations this time. We then have the parentheses where there is the author listed and the date of publication. If we go back to our document embedded in the LMS, where we have the types of evidence, hierarchy of evidence, you'll actually also have the different methods of citing sources embedded in this document as well. So I find this to just be a gold mine of resources when working on proposals, to be able to refer to this quickly and to the different types of evidence that we can use within the documentation, just so I make sure I'm using a mix. Or if I can just clarify for myself again, all right, which different forms am I using? Do I have a number 2 here, a number 4, in terms of ranking hierarchy of evidence? So I feel that I've had a good diverse mix of evidence introduced into my written work. And before going on, was there any questions on methods of citation or forms of evidence that we have discussed so far?
One question I had was, if you have discussion with participants about things like character counts or word counts, and what the alternatives are in doing the various forms of citation, especially if we're working on a very limited amount of space.
Yes, if this space is very, very small, there's not a lot to work with, I would tend to use a resource that is like a journal, something very credible that can speak to the issue, but also something that's short and snippet that really has a strong statistic. that I can work with that helps point to the case I'm trying to make, but I wouldn't tend to use like a 2-3 sentence quote in something with limited space. I just want something that I can do a quick inline citation that's going to lend to the story that I'm trying to tell. Aaron, do you have any additional thoughts for that?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay. Did anyone else in the group who has had that challenge before when working with proposals and you have limited space, how did you compromise that with the evidence you were looking to cite? Or maybe not even a proposal, a research paper for school, if you can harken back to that, if there's any strategy that you've had that was useful.
I mean, using superscripts is my preferred method to cite sources, and having a works cited document. You know, the other methods, I'm not very good with this. I think my works cited probably is a combination of Chicago and APA and whatever else is out there. I forget the formats. I think they're stupid. I just try to be consistent with, you know, what I italicize and where I put the periods, and make sure I have the publisher and the author and the title and the date and all that stuff. I've never had anyone reject a proposal because I didn't follow the right format, but it is important to properly cite your sources, for, you know, for attribution, give people the credit and so forth. That's really the bottom line, is don't steal someone else's information.
Yeah, fair.
Well,
And, oh, sorry, go ahead.
and I just wanted to say, you know, and again, that's why when I get my other staff member on these calls who really do a lot of the proposals, I provide the information. But I know we've been relying more on some of this, the scientific data, because we're doing air monitoring and, you know, and for our community, we feel as though we shouldn't have to have validation off some scientific, you know, kind of reporting, or, you know, so we always felt that the story of the residents should be enough. And, you know, I'm just looking at this and it's showing that it really isn't, which, you know, from an EJ perspective is a little problematic. But we're just getting into it. And so I know for me, it's all new. So I need to just acclimate myself with it, but I wanted to lift that up, that I know a lot of EJ community-based groups who haven't been around more than 5 years or 3 to 5 years aren't doing all of this.
Right. I think that the individual stories of the communities are essential and invaluable to really sharing the story and sharing why this work is needed. And I don't also recognize too that in some regions there's not funding for research to take place. But I do think there's ways that I've worked with organizations that serve one individual story within a proposal, but also compile all the anecdotal stories they have received and use it as a way to drive data. So that they can say, you know, there were 100 community members surveyed, and that can also speak to this experience. So that way you're producing more authoritative data as well from those community stories.
I mean, I think an important point when you're training people too is to let them know that, you know, you can tone down some of this stuff. Like, they're not submitting a paper to the Journal of, you know, Scientific America or whatever. The places they're applying to for grants are going to be aware that they're small community groups. They're not going to be expected to have their own research, and they're not going to be expected to have done like a rigorous literature review necessarily, right? So that's important to point out, especially for the EPA. Even for the EPA, I've done a lot of big grants for the EPA, and they don't really even care. Like, I've got $1 million grants without submitting really any research or literature review or anything. So it kind of depends on what the funder's looking for. Some really want that hard data, some don't care. And a lot of times, if the EPA is looking for it for EJ grants, they'll tell you where to get it. Like the EJ Screen tool can be useful, and there's other tools like that which they will kind of point you towards. So when you're presenting like this material, just present it with a grain of salt, or in the context that this is kind of just for reference, but you're going to go to bat with the information that you have available. And if all you have is a community survey you did of 20 people that highlights a problem, then you use that. So you just want to use, kind of the point of this is use information that's as credible as possible from sources that people will intrinsically trust to the extent that you can.
Well,
I actually think,
I'm
oh,
sorry. Go ahead.
okay, I was just gonna say, and I actually think to that point, when you're transparent about those issues specifically, saying, you know, we don't have the resources or infrastructure here to be able to adequately point to data study this, because we have been that resource, this singular resource for a community. You can establish yourself as the authority when there's transparency within the proposal of, you know, without us, none of these conversations could be facilitated in a way that we could be collecting these anecdotal stories. So I think acknowledging that you are the one helping bridge and communicate this issue to a larger platform, and without that, these issues wouldn't even be being heard or vocalized, can actually lend to the argument of why this program or why this funding is needed as well. So, but yeah.
I was just going to go back to where we started the discussion around trust. And I think from a facilitator standpoint, as Kim was also saying about EJ communities, there is a distrust in many communities, not all, of the way in which statistics and studies have either been used against the community,
Yes.
or the helicopter approach where folks drop in, do the study, and have kind of an extractive relationship with the community as opposed to affirming them. And so I think if we're going to be working with smaller community-based grassroots organizations, there needs to be kind of a created safe space for folks to bring that part of who they are and feel like they can talk about the way in which authoritative writing incorporated in their proposal can be addressed without it making seem like it's the experiences that they are bringing are substandard or should not be valued as highly as all of the money that's been poured into the universities with the very large indirect costs that speak for authority, but don't, you know, necessarily, like the Lord, speak for the trees. So I, you know, just think that those conversations might happen, and that maybe we would want to be prepared for that, because for some people, scientific study has not always been a positive impact in validating the community.
How do you turn that into, this is not a rhetorical question, this is like me saying, okay, maybe for this we need to go back to the drawing board and make some tweaks. How would you build that into a teaching session in a way that was kind of lets people get that off their chest and express their feelings, but it is also productive in that it helps them understand the knowledge that they have that they can leverage, and also understand that, yes, you have some good points, but you still are going to have to present your information in a way that's acceptable to the funder, regardless of their deficiency from, you know, in terms of their expectations. Yvonne, what do you think about that?
Well, I don't know that I have an answer other than what I've said, but I think that if there's a way to create a space for that conversation to happen, you know, it's not going to be, you know, done in 5 or 10 minutes necessarily, but there's somewhere in the design there can be room allowing that to happen, and to affirm what it is people are bringing, because for many people, we've been told, you know, your perspective is wrong, or it's not good enough, or it's not authentic, or whatever. So, and then to say to those people, well, you got to go out and get some data to validate what you already know to be true, makes a certain amount of tension. So I just think that there's that area of discussion that needs to happen where people can share, we start out talking about people you trust, maybe having the flip side of that is there, a time that you can think of when you trusted someone and that trust was betrayed, and however that, might fall.
Mm.
I think that then moving into, okay, this is what may be needed. It may not always be needed. As you say, not all funders require it. But if it is needed, then this is how you could do it. But at least to kind of make that distinction of knowledge, if we are empowering people to have their own voices, they're allowed to have their own voices and to share what that experience is and have it be validated as being real and authentic.
Yeah, and I was going to add just to say, and thanks
Well-
for those comments, Yvonne, because I was going to go there, but I was just like for time. But it is important because we want to show up as our authentic selves. And excuse me, for folks in our communities, that has been data has always been a problem where the scientists got to come in, and now it's not until they come in and then based on all their studies that what we know to be true is now validated. Like us dying in our community each and every day is not enough. And so I think you kind of bring that up with some kind of acknowledgement of that. It's like we acknowledge the land and territories that we come in this space. When you come into that, let's think about some ways that we can acknowledge that and say it in a way, and maybe it's listed. There are several examples we probably could come up with. I mean, not right now, but if I had to give some thought about it, I know I could send you some information so that, it is coming from that grassroots, bottom up EJ kind of space first, and people understanding, because that is, for some folks, that's what they hate about writing grants, is because they know, that they are looking for some of these, all these other things that they just don't have. And so, yeah, it's definitely wanted to agree with how you could bring it in with that exercise, but then or have some additional attachments and some links to some other ways in which
well, part of it might be I didn't see this before. I definitely see it now. It's helping people understand that they are authoritative by default about their communities. They don't have to go prove that they have to figure out a way to communicate their authoritativeness. But I think, to your point, they are the authorities. They know what's going on in their communities. They've lived it. Fuck the data, right? There's no data, so screw that. So we have to figure out a way to help them communicate what they know to be true about their community in a way that is going to be perceived as credible.
Yeah, and or value. Truck counts by community groups is valuable to them, right? Because they know how many trucks come through. They know the number of families that are suffering from asthma, all these other things. That is real data. I mean, I used to say 1 in 4 children in Newark had asthma. And I remember, because I had a doctor do a mapping exercise almost 15 years ago. It took North Bethesda Hospital, Robert Wood Johnson, they about 3 months ago said, Kim, you were spot on. The data says and Dr. Nikki Sheets, one of our colleagues, he never wanted to put that in a document because he's a scientist by trade and a lawyer. Kim, we can't put out stuff I know from what I've been doing in my community. And when the light bulb went off for everybody just like 6 months ago, I was just like, this is just crazy. But nobody even wanted to use that statistic that I knew of based on mapping, talking to people, analyzing. I knew that to be true. And so that's why, I don't want to, this is just a pet peeve of mine. I don't want to take any more space, but that's, it's a trigger when I start hearing those kind of things, because it impacted our community.
I think, unfortunately, if we look at some of the pivotal moments of environmental justice history, I mean, the folks in Flint, Michigan knew before it caught up to everybody else, but I think that was a situation where, again, you didn't have everything documented, or in Chicago when, over 800 people died from heat in the summer. I mean, we knew what the houses were like. We knew what the conditions were. We knew what the environment, the heat index was going to be. But still, that wasn't necessarily documented in a way that would meet requirements. And in Chicago, we have more lead pipes than anyone else. And we know the connection between the effect of lead in children and the vulnerable. But again, in order to get it to be a funded program, you have to find someone who has the PhD or has spent the time to draw down the numbers and say exactly what the community is telling folks based on lived experience. So again, not to belabor that, but I think there needs to be a space created so folks can bring that so that they can get to a point to appreciate how to use the data that they do have and to present it in such a way as that it will attract funds.
Do we see the Tic Tacs as potential hubs and opportunities to be able to harness anecdotal data in ways that it lends to making it authoritative and collective resources, so that like establishing the Tic Tacs as some of these central authorities and a trusted resource within the community? Is there opportunities for that, do we think, in 2024? To be like, we're hearing trends across the board, let's, compile this and be able to speak to that as a resource.
I think if we don't, it's a lost opportunity.
Yeah, I think we probably will go back to the drawing board and revisit the structure of this lesson and also the handout too, because I think I can see how it can be viewed as a little condescending, like this hierarchy thing. Like now I'm thinking that it definitely needs to be changed. So I'm open to that.
But even with attorneys, sometimes they don't have their own data, but they use case studies. So what's wrong with using your story, telling your story and associate it with an existing case study? Does that not work in grant writing, Aaron?
Sure, it does. I mean, Deep South does that all the time. I mean,
so I don't think you have to give up your story. You can just associate it with a testing or a case study or something that is very similar to your story, because they're out there.
This is where the art of writing and your role as coaches and technical support providers comes in, because it's going to be very frustrating as you're discussing for groups to think about how they put their story on paper in a way that's going to be perceived as worthy from the funders. And you're going to help them craft their story and present it in a way that seems credible, that it seems like it's not like a standalone thing. Bring in other sources to the extent that you can. So, because as you pointed out, it's a very frustrating paradigm to deal with. And then the groups that you're dealing with are going to be more marginalized and have even less experience and just maybe even have already checked out because they've already been pushed down so much.
Right. And then that becomes intimidating to them, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying, and I do think, for some people who've been around the Dr. Bullets of the world, you have that, and you have scientists and all these big green organizations who've been supporting and helping you. I'm always thinking about those groups because although I've been in this space for 25 plus years, I just founded my own organization 3 years ago. And yes, all what I've achieved with Clean Water Action is different than what I'm doing with South Water Environmental Alliance. And I can see the difference. There's intimidation, these organizations feel, first of all, that they're going to be overlooked. And so when you don't value what's important to them, and if you look at something just in a quick overlook of what was just presented, a lot of them will shut down. I'm just saying they will shut down because it's looking like, here we go again in another setting where we're just not being heard. We don't even have all of that. So that's why, just going back to Yvonne's point and seeing Morgan and everybody shaking their head in agreement, I do think this is an opportunity for the hubs to kind of correct that shit. And then with Writing for Green as a partner, how can we then change it, modify so that it's important? I mean, this is the same thing we're doing with funders now, and they're being a little bit more open with letting groups send in videos, have a call in, because the application process is very, very difficult.
Yep. I agree with that. I'm wondering too, if as TikToks, and I know as Writing for Green too, with the connections we have to some of these more government-based funders, if this is a good opportunity to be able to raise some of these concerns and issues, because most of the challenges I have with citations and bringing in this evidentiary support is with government funds, and I think with the clients I've worked with that are on reservations in those communities, like they do not want them to have the data. So it's like, how do we meet in the middle?
Is
I
there
guess.
room for a unit on, maybe how to create a case study? In other words, how do you take your story or the story of your community, case study formats, and use that as one of the pieces of documentation? So we're helping folks to learn how to take the story that is authentic and true to them and put it in a format that could be then used in other instances, grants, as well as maybe, other solicitations.
Yeah, and white papers. When community-based groups, real grassroots hear that's not something that they,
We have
do.
we have a lesson to be telling the story, but these are 2-hour training sessions, so each one is not enough. But these are the kind of ways that you can parlay this into something that follows up. So if you teach them, or even if they go through the self-directed course and take the lesson on telling your story, they're going to get some idea about how to build emotion, how to be emotive when they write, how to talk about the impact on people. That's kind of generally. And then maybe the follow-up tech support you all provide is helping them create that case study. That's going to take a lot of in-depth work. I know with Deep South, they have a whole road mapping thing where they're doing community-based surveys and needs assessments. So there's a lot that we're not going to cover in this because you all do it. We can allude to it and maybe say, and make a space in the lesson plans for you to kind of transition from this to the next step. Like, you've been trained, you've had some training. Now let's talk about, let's look at your actual community and talk about what's going on, and look at it through the lens of, we got to tell an effective story to build into a grant proposal. That requires a lot more work, but I think we can help provide the foundation that you can build on to do that.
Aaron, could we have some sort of a kind of central brain for the Tic Tacs? Maybe if it's just as simple as a drive, but if there's some Tic Tacs that find, hey, here's a knowledge gap that we want to fill and append to this curriculum, and they see that it's effective and going well, that they could share it with us and the other Tic Tacs, and then that can live as like, this is a Deep South addendum to the curriculum. Something that they found that works really effectively that we can incorporate in and circulate as a resource to other organizations.
Yeah, if we could figure out how to do that, that could be useful. And I think we're kind of also collecting ideas for revising our current training and creating new modules as well. And again, these aren't, the reason we're doing it with you all is because we don't want these to be standalone. This is just kind of the starting point so that you can take this as a resource and use it for the building and capacity that you're doing. The tech support really is much more than just teaching people how to write a grant. Obviously, it's teaching them how to believe in themselves and how to collect their stories and tell their stories and advocate for themselves. All the stuff that we can't do, but you can do and have been doing it. So that, we just want to be there to support you, which is why in that effort, which is why that we're kind of spending so much time on this now, because we realize we have to do kind of a 180 for this particular lesson and make it more responsive to what, your constituents are going to need. So we definitely hear that message. And your time's up, Catherine.
Yeah. Well, all the valid criticism aside, the writing exercise in this lesson is a lot of fun. Just
So- Well, everyone has a lesson plan, so you can look through it and see what's coming up. But do you want to just tell people what is next so they just have that vision?
Yes. Well, there is. Oh, I'll just go to it quickly. Yeah, this worksheet that was produced, or the exercise where there's actual sources that were produced, real or fake, on a particular topic, that you as the writer could select which of these data or information you'd like to incorporate into a paragraph to write a brief problem statement. So it just opened up a lot of creativity and fun, that after reading the data information, you could devise a certain scenario or predicament that you would like to have this evidence serve. So yeah, I had fun with it from a creative writing perspective.
So this, and then the rest kind of follows a framework for the rest of for the other sessions. We do the presentation, we do like kind of an exercise as a group, which we just did, and then divide up into small groups to do or actually individual to do the writing, and then come back in a big group and discuss what people wrote and share the stories and so forth. So, in that debrief. So that's just kind of the flow of it from there. But we'll skip because we're already a little bit over, we'll skip the post-lesson survey for now. I know you're probably all terribly disappointed about that, but you'll get over it. Any final closing remarks, Catherine?
Well, I appreciate everybody sticking around past time to listen to me drone on about data and evidence. But I actually am really grateful to everyone for speaking up and speaking out on where these sessions and lessons can be more responsive and actually be meeting the needs of our intended end users and participants. Because forming some of these lessons, with one lens, one background, which is, trying to be as effective as we can in getting wins, from some of these government funders that we're targeting, we can miss at the end of the day on how to connect that to the user and make sure it speaks and describes to them. So your feedback is very, very valuable in helping us make sure that we're connecting both ends and not just thinking about necessarily always about winning the funds, but how do we do it in a way that we're advocating and leveraging what these community-based organizations are already doing.
From a modeling perspective, like this, you're going to find yourself in this situation when you're delivering trainings as well. Like this is not at all a waste of time, even though we didn't cover what's on the agenda. And you'll find you'll go on divergent paths at some points when you're delivering this material or other material. And you can see like everyone was involved in this conversation. We all learned something. We all have like things on our to-do list now as a result of it. And we're thinking about things from a different perspective. So you're going to find that some of these side conversations that end up turning into bigger conversations are going to be more valuable than anything that we have planned. And you should just follow it and see where it goes. So thank you all. If anyone wants to stick around and give us any quick feedback, we're open to it. And otherwise, we'll be back here again on next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then 2 days after that. So we're now halfway through this accelerated training. And we'll have all the lessons covered by the next 5 sessions.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.